Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 27 of the On Deck podcast. I'm your host, Roberto, and today we're going to be going over the All-Star festivities. We're going to be talking about the Home Run Derby, the Futures game, the All-Star game itself, which I think everybody, was talking about and how that game ended. But all that on today's episode, so stay tuned in for a great podcast today. So starting off with the Futures game, which in my opinion is probably one of my favorite things to watch during All-Star weekend. Obviously, of course, after the game, not too big of a fan of the celebrity softball, but everybody likes seeing people play softball, all types of actors, former MLB players, all we got comedians in there too now. I saw a clip of Drewski circling around on social media, which was funny. But to me, the Futures game is what I love to watch because this is the future of the MLB. These are budding stars that over the years we've seen become superstars. Like I remember watching Pete Alonso mash at the All-Star game or the Futures All-Star game when it was in Washington that year, and look who he's become just a few years later, one of the premier power bats in the MLB. And even going back to last year's All-Star game, we have Mizorowski and his performance and how many eyes that arm opened, and now he's an All-Star. But we'll touch up on that later. But yeah, this was it was quite an interesting game. We had some very encouraging arms and young bats, and personally, some of the guys that I liked watching during this game was Trey Yeasavage. Even though he did only throw to one batter, he did get the strikeout. Just to see some of his stuff, because I think this is one of the more promising Jays arms. They really haven't had too much luck with developing arms lately. They had Ricky Tiedemann, who's been just riddled with injuries. They had Bloss, who I think went down to Tommy John a couple months ago, so he's not going to be pitching for a while. And then I was going to say Manoah, but you can't even count Manoah as a prospect anymore. He's just been non-existent, but I'm a Manoah hater. I think everybody in my circle who knows me and knows that I despise Manoah with like a passion. But anyways, this is not going to turn into an Alek Manoah rant, but it was really cool to see Trey Yeasavage throw. That splitter is absolutely legit. And he comes from a really weird like arm angle, which I think can create some deception. Obviously, with that splitter working off of, say, a low fastball, and you throw that splitter off, that I think he could rack up a whole bunch of strikeouts, and I think his numbers show that in the minors. So I think this is a guy that we can see come up in, who knows, maybe as soon as next year for the Jays. If they look to trade off some pieces to get some bats during the trade deadline, I think this is someone that could be accelerated a little bit, but time will tell. It was also cool to see Brewers prospect Jesus Made. There's been so much hype around this guy. He's like 12 years old, and he's a absolutely electric. Okay, he's not 12 years old, but he's an absolutely electric prospect. So to see him in like live action against, the best of the best prospect arms was pretty cool. JJ Weatherholt really surprised me. A couple of his swings. I think two out of his three at bats were lefty, and he really stuck in there against some really good guys. The one against Noah Schultz, even though he did line out, it was just a great at bat, good swing. So I'm excited to see JJ Weatherholt come up and make an impact for the Cardinals. This is another guy that I can think could come up either, later in the year based on if the Cardinals are, in contention or not, just to see what they have with him. And then moving on to, Dodgers, Josue DePaula hit an absolute huge home run off Noah Schultz to really open up the game for the National League. And that was a really cool moment. I was watching that at bat, and he had thrown him 2 sweepers already. Wasn't close on the first swing. Took the second one, and even me, as a pitcher, I had that mentality of, to say, I'm gonna throw him another sweeper. He's gonna swing and miss, and at bat's over. But Noah Schultz did hang it, and Josue did bang it into right field. So yeah, it was another cool moment. And again, this is just another great prospect for the Dodgers. It seems like they just spawn these guys off the streets at this point. And it was also really cool to see Durangelo Sinjay pitch again. I know he pitched in last year's Futures game. But just to see the development, he threw a couple pitches in the upper 90s from the right side. And that was always something that I think could have ticked up, especially, being in a major league system now, with all the access to the biomechanics and all the pitching labs that they have nowadays, and just the information. Got up to 99 with some sink from the right side, yuck, absolutely yuck. And then from the lefty, I think it's still a work in progress. He did throw a pretty nasty slider. I've always liked it from the left side. He has more of a 3/4 arm slot, so that slider really more looks like a sweeper with the break. But I just still think this is probably the coolest player, outside of obviously Shohei Ohtani, because that guy is just he's easily. Not even easily. He's hands down the best baseball player that has ever played the game. And we're comparing him to Babe Ruth, and Babe Ruth didn't throw 100, wasn't stealing 50 bases a season. So it's just crazy to see that, we have two-way players that are discussing on both sides of the ball. And then we have switch pitchers throwing 99 from the right side, and then discussing sweepers and off speed from the left side. Absolutely insane. Another guy that I really liked was Jonah Tong. I've been seeing a bunch of clips on him on, Instagram and Twitter throughout the last month, because he's absolutely been killing it in the minor leagues, in Double-A, and I think he got moved up to Triple-A. Don't quote me on that, but just to see his motion, and I think he resembles it pretty well for being a short guy with that kind of stature. He tried to model his game off of Tim Lincecum, and I see it. It's definitely not as aggressive and wild, but the over the top, just how smooth it is coming out of his hand, I think is really good, and that changeup and the curveball that he flashed it seemed pretty legit in my eyes. So I honestly would like to see him maybe not start immediately. I think this guy can definitely make an impact on the Mets roster now. And this is a team that has a bunch of question marks in the starting rotation. They had Manaea coming back from injury, Kodai Senga coming back from injury. You have a guy like Clay Holmes who, has thrown, he's slowed down from his hot start, obviously, from the start of the season. But this is a guy that's been a reliever his whole career. And, as soon as you see those innings tick up, how is he going to look? Is he going to fade pretty quickly, or, is he going to stand strong throughout the, 100 plus innings, 120 plus innings that he's going to throw? And, I think with Griffin Canning going down and, Paul Blackburn not looking like Paul Blackburn, I think this is a guy that, you can have in a swingman role, bouncing back from, spot starts here and there. But I think this is a guy that can make an impact in the bullpen in short spurts. You could see the velo tick up for sure. But I think Jonah Tong can definitely make an impact for the Mets this year. And that might be crazy to say, but, after watching this stuff and, the pitchability that he has, I think he can absolutely make an impact for the Mets this year. Connor Griffin for the Pirates, unfortunately he did get hurt. Got a ball off the wrist in his second at bat, but I think that's another cool prospect for the Pirates. They really haven't had, I can't even say that. They have Bubba Chandler just chilling in AAA still, but I think this is a guy that can make an impact for the Pirates as well. He was a outfielder, turned shortstop, shortstop turned outfielder. But this is a guy that is young, athletic, is gonna definitely make an impact for the Pirates. It's just a matter of when they decide to do that. But the Pirates aren't looking to be good anytime soon. So why not give this guy a try? He's definitely going to be, if they trade Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, the Pirates, I think this is the perfect opportunity for a guy like Connor Griffin to get called up and to show what he's got, especially at the end of the year. You're not playing for anything. You're not playing for a playoff position. So why not just see what you got for next year? A couple other guys that really I thought made an impact. Kevin McGonigal from the the Detroit Tigers. This is a guy that I've heard and seen getting a lot of hype on social media, and I see why. I really see why. This guy just has insane hit tool. Like this guy's definitely gonna make an impact sooner rather than later. He could even get called up like today for the Tigers and definitely make an impact. There's a couple pitches that he swung at, and made contact with in this game that I'm like, how did you get to that? He's a lefty. He had a swing lefty. The pitch up and in that he shot to left field, like up at his like neck level. I was like, wow, that's an impressive swing. To even get solid wood on a swing like that is impressive. And then Max Clark, that guy's been in, I think, the last 2 or 3 Futures games, and he just seems to be getting better and better. I think this could definitely be, a Parker Meadows replacement, but so much more electric. We obviously know he's insanely fast. The defense has always been there, but the hit tool and the power are starting to show now. With the development that he's had over, I think it was this summer, he made some swing changes. I remember listening to a podcast about that a couple months ago, but I really always liked Max Clark. I think he's such a, he's a kid playing baseball. Like there's you can't hate on a guy like that ever. You just want to see him succeed, and right now he could be, banging on the door for the Tigers as soon as next year to be getting that starting center fielder role. And then last guy I'm only going to talk about because obviously George Lombard Jr. I absolutely love him. I love him so much. But the problem is that we have Anthony Volpe at shortstop, and there's been moments where Lombard has played second base, he's played a little bit of third base, but his primary position is shortstop. So it creates an interesting situation for the Yankees. Like if they decide to lock up Jazz, I think that's your second baseman. Anthony Volpe, as of recording on July 21st, Anthony Volpe had a 2-home run game a couple days ago. Like he hasn't looked great, but the signs are looking a little better. And I think this is a guy that just was in a month and a half rut that he's definitely climbing out of, I think the All-Star break definitely helped him, get out of, have some time off away from baseball, kind of just reset. And I really like Anthony Volpe personally. Like, I know his defense and, some of his at-bats drive people crazy. I saw a stat before the All-Star break that he's left the most runners on base, which isn't nice to look at. But, he is young. He's 23, 24. Like, he has a lot of time to figure it out. And I know a lot of people are expecting him to be the next version of Jeter, but that's not who he's going to be. So I think we kind of need to, lower our expectations a little bit. Stop being so harsh on the guy. But I think Lombard is definitely the real deal. He is the real deal, absolutely. And I just love how electric he is. He can run. We saw him steal a base, hit a double. He has a good eye, had a walk. Like, he was showing it all off in that game. And, I love to see it as a Yankees fan. And I'm sure a lot of people, like, around baseball love him too, because what's not there to love? This guy's athletic. He can hit. He did show some good power in spring training this year. And a lot of people were saying, bring him up, start him on the major league roster. And we forget that he was like 19, just about to turn 20. So that's kind of crazy. But, maybe in a couple years or maybe even next year, we could see him make an impact on the roster, depending on, how the roster breaks down and if they decide to trade Oswald Peraza. But who knows? Time will tell. But, overall, this Futures game was really entertaining. I will get to some of the things I want to change. But man, this is just one of my favorite things to watch during All-Star Weekend. So some of the things that, kind of need to change, in my opinion, for these Futures games is, why are they 7 innings? Why? Like, I know we want to have the players, come here to the game, have fun, perform well, and then go back to their respected teams healthy and in one piece. But why are we shortening the game? This is for people and, scouts and fans to see the future of baseball. So why are we cutting them short on an opportunity to see, someone like a Durangelo Sinjay, who obviously was going to pitch because he's a switch pitcher and that's just the coolest thing ever. But who knows, like, we could have seen Trey Yeasavage get a whole inning and we would have seen what that looks like in a 3-batter sample, instead of, having him throw one out and then tossing it to another guy to get the next 2 outs. I think, obviously depending on certain situations, if, they threw a few days before or whatever, that's fine. But if we come into the game and we're fully healthy, I think we should, have this game be 9 innings. Make it a real MLB game. Like, for some of these players, knock on wood, but this is their first time possibly being in an MLB stadium. So I'd want to soak that in for as long as possible. Especially in the stadium, Truist Park. I've been there, and it's a beautiful park. The atmosphere is great. The scenery, what's it called? The Battery, which leads you into, the stadium and everything around it. It's actually a really, really cool atmosphere. There's a place to sit and eat just outside the gates, and you can even watch the game from there. Sit down I've gone out there, sat with the lawn chair and just watched the game. If you can't get tickets, right before from scalpers or whatever, it's a really cool, really, really cool stadium. If you have the chance to go, I'd absolutely recommend it. But I think it just should be 9 innings. I think we're robbing the fans of, not quote unquote free baseball, but I'd want to see my favorite players or even some of the future players come out there and show out. I get that we need to have everybody get some at bats or pitch an inning or an out, but if we extend the game, that means more opportunities for guys to come in and show their work. And who knows, this could also be a showcase for, guys that ultimately want to get traded. Could see a guy like, George Lombard showed out in the futures game. I'm going to keep an eye out on him, see if we can get him in a trade or, have him be our headline piece in a trade package, stuff like that. I think it could, I think it just helps the game, and I may be biased because I love the futures game, and I want to always see more of it. But yeah, I think the futures game should just be 9 innings. I did find it cool that, throughout the weekend we did see the ABS system. I'm still on the fence about it. But it was cool to see a couple calls. Some of them were really close, and I was like, damn, some of these guys got really good eye for the plate and, know that strike zone well. So that can just boost what scouts see. This guy's able to control the plate, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, overall, I think those are it's only the one thing I'd change, but I did think it was really cool to see the ABS system being implemented into All-Star Weekend, like in the All-Star game itself. But yeah, futures games, I gotta have a chat with Rob Manfred and get that thing back to 9 innings. Now moving on to the Home Run Derby, which was, I think it's always fun to watch, but they changed the format up again this year. So this year it was 40 pitches or 3 minutes of hitting, and you get your timeout and you can call it whenever. But interesting to see that, we're kind of moving further and further away from the out system. But you were able to get bonuses for, what was it? It was bonus time if you had a home run over 425 or 35 feet. And then, it was based on outs in the bonus round. So I think you got, was it 3 outs? And then if you hit one over 430, you get an extra out. So it was 4 outs that you got to play with. I can't remember, but it was a little bit confusing. But we had some big names in there. We had Matt Olson replacing Ronald Acuna from the Braves. We had Cal Raleigh from the Mariners. We had Jazz Chisholm from my Yankees, Byron Buxton from the Twins, O'Neal Cruz from the Pirates, Junior Caminero from the Rays, Brent Rooker from the No City Designation Athletics, and then James Wood from the Nationals. And, everybody put on quite a show except for Jazz. Out of 40 balls, Jazz hit 3 home runs, and he was had an interview with the Yankees media, just media in general, and then he said, he wasn't really trying to mess up his swing, yada yada. And I was like, man, if you were gonna participate, why don't you just go for it? But he said that if he has 20 home runs by the All-Star break next year, then he'd try again. But I don't know if anybody's gonna want him back, because I'm not watching a guy, talk about, I'd love to be, part of the home run derby, and then do that, put up an absolute stinker. But anyways, we saw O'Neal Cruz hit a ball 513 feet or 512 feet. Yeah, that was absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. That guy has stupid power, and only if we can get him a little more engaged on the defensive side of the baseball. He's one of the more entertaining players. He hits the ball so hard and so far, and he throws the ball insanely hard too from the outfield, now that he's playing center field. But man, it was very entertaining, this one. We had it was between Cal Raleigh and Brent Rooker, that their home runs were separated by it was less than an inch, which was absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And that people are saying, "Oh, that was the script. That was the script that Cal Raleigh won." Well, spoiler, Cal Raleigh won, but oh, it was a spoiler that that it was a script that Cal Raleigh, beat out him by less than an inch, and it was just meant to be. But that's crazy. I don't think it's ever come down to that small of a margin in between the tiebreaker. But to me, the real surprise here was Junior Caminero. I know he didn't really show out in the finals, or in the semifinals, sorry. But man, did this guy put on a show. His swing is just so effortless. It was so effortless. And I think this is, for a Tampa Bay Rays team that doesn't get much, national recognition, even though they had been playing well before the All-Star break. I think this, and we forget Junior Caminero just turned, 22 years old? That, the future is bright for Caminero. I think the only downside I remember them talking on the broadcast is that he's bounced out into the most double plays, and is on pace to set the league record in ground out into double play balls this year. But outside of that, this guy is definitely going to be a great young player and a budding, dare I say it, star, especially with the swing like that and putting up offensive numbers. And he's just getting better and better as he's going to get older. So I'm excited to see Junior Caminero, bud into this star, especially for the Tampa Bay Rays. And then Buxton too. I'm always like a low key Buxton lover. He's absolutely electric when he's healthy and, able to play on the field. And this year he's playing center field, and, outside of that concussion protocol from bumping into Carlos Correa, he's on pace to play the most games that he has in a season since, I think it was 2014. I can't remember. I did a little segment on Buxton earlier in the season about just how hot he was to start the season off, and he hasn't slowed down. This Twins team though isn't doing too great. We couldn't actually see Buxton get traded, which would be an interesting trade package and trade partner based on what team he goes to. But at the end of the day, we had Cal Raleigh win the whole Derby. And, I think it was a cool moment because he was getting thrown to by his dad. And then to have his brother catching two, I think that's just a cool family moment. And then at the very end of the Derby, they showed a clip of Cal Raleigh actually talking about winning the home run derby as a kid, which, ultimate aura from that. But it was crazy to see the super side note that Cal Raleigh's brother, who was, I think they said he was 15 or 16, almost be up to Cal Raleigh's height. And I had to look it up. So I was like, Cal Raleigh he's not a small dude. He was 6'3". And I was like, so his brother at 15 is 6'2", maybe pushing 6'3". I was like, wow, that is some crazy genes. And the dad wasn't that tall anyway, too. But anyways, we're getting sidetracked here. But, happy for Cal Raleigh. That kind of just puts the bow on top of an amazing first half that he had and all the records that he broke, from most home runs as a catcher. I think he came second for most home runs before the All-Star break. Just I think he was one behind Barry Bonds' record. So anytime you're in a conversation with Barry Bonds, that's just elite company to be a part of. And hopefully, he stays hot in the second half, but hopefully not. Because I think Aaron Judge is, starting to heat back up, and I want him to win another MVP. I know people are saying, oh, voters fatigue, but it's pretty undeniable at what he's doing at this point. He could go down as probably the best right-handed hitter of all time. So it's kind of, obviously, again, Yankees bias here. Yankees bias that I want to see Aaron Judge win MVP, but Cal Raleigh will definitely give him a run for his money. Now, finishing it up with the All-Star game, and, unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch the game. I had my own baseball game, actually, that evening. But, man, the All-Star game, especially when you have the headline of Tarek Skubal and Paul Skenes starting that game, that's like must-watch TV. I know it's only for an inning, but it's must-watch TV. And Paul Skenes, again, didn't disappoint. Threw up a punch he had 2 strikeouts through the first inning, and the fastball velocity was the quickest that we've ever seen in an All-Star game since, the pitch tracking era. And 100 on both strikeouts. You got Gleyber Torres on a fastball, 99. And then another Tiger, Riley Green, said, hold that. I'm going to throw it right by you again at 100. And then he got Aaron Judge to ground out. But this, man, I just love watching Paul Skenes pitch. And especially in the All-Star game where everybody knows that, the hitters are trying to go deep and pitchers are trying to strike everybody out and throw absolute gas. This is just entertaining. I think this might be one of the only All-Star games that we see both sides like trying to win. The All-Star game in the NBA has gotten absolutely horrendous when it comes to being competitive. I can't speak for hockey, but I don't think it even comes close to comparing what the All-Star game is for baseball. But man, we saw some names in this game. We had a bunch of guys show out for their first time. We had Jacob Wilson. We had Clayton Kershaw come out for the Legends pick. It was a cool moment. He did get saved by a Kyle Tucker, dive or sliding catch that would have been definitely extra bases, especially when you're throwing 89 to Cal Raleigh, who just won the home run derby not even 24 hours before. But it was cool to see. And then he did get a strikeout on Vlad, which it had to be like a pity moment because I don't think that that happens very often. But he did get a standing ovation when being pulled out of the game. And, for a guy that's been around the league for as long as he has and has accomplished as much as he has, I think this is the perfect way to end up. Clayton Kershaw is definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer. There could be a conversation with him being, the greatest left-handed pitcher of all time. He definitely has the accolades for it. And, with him breaking that 3,000 strikeout threshold, absolutely first ballot Hall of Fame. And if he doesn't end up being a first ballot, I will be utterly, utterly shocked. But this All-Star game had a lot of fireworks. Scoring got started early in the first inning when a Ketel Marte double scored Ronald Acuna and Shohei Ohtani. And then there really wasn't anything until the 6th inning when the NL scored again on a Pete Alonso home run. This was, as the Mets and Braves have always gone back and forth for years. We did hear some boos after this home run for Pete, but it got the NL out to a 5-0 lead in the 6th, And then right after, we had Corbin Carroll hit a home run, so ended up being 6-0. And a cool thing on this that I heard is that the Diamondbacks were the last team needed to have a player in the All-Star game hit a home run, which I found was like shocking, because the the Diamondbacks have always had good players. So for none of them to have hit a home run in an All-Star game, because I thought Ketel Marte might have, but I guess not. So that was pretty shocking to me, but definitely a cool moment for Corbin Carroll, who's been absolutely balling out this year. But the AL did get a home run coming from the bat of Brent Rooker, also someone that participated in the home run derby. And then, the ninth inning is where everything just pure madness happened. We had Bobby Witt score Byron Buxton on a double to make it a 6-5 game. Two guys scored. And then we had known home run hitter Jazz Chisholm grounded out to Matt Olson at first base, moving over Bobby Witt to third. And then we had Steven Kwan come up clutch and hit a single to Gino Suarez, and that ended up scoring Bobby Witt from third. And then we had a tie game after 9, and I was watching this on my phone at this point, and I was like, so what happens now? And a swing off happens for the first time ever. And so for the National League, they had called up Kyle Stowers from the Marlins, Schwarber from the Phillies, and then Pete Alonso from the Mets. And then for the AL, we had Brent Rooker, Randy Arozarena, and Jonathan Aranda. Very, question marked name in that lineup. But, this is guys that were on the bench, I think. I think that's what happens. I think you can't choose the starters, obviously, because they're not in the game. But, we had these guys basically have a home run derby, have 3 home runs or 3 swings, and, most home runs wins. And we had Kyle Stowers hit 1, Schwarber hit 3. So that had the NL with 4. And then unfortunately, Brent Rooker hit 2, Randy hit 1, and Jonathan Aranda hit none. Go figure for the guy hitting 333 that has, I think, single digits still in home runs for the year. But anyways, so we had the NL win, and Schwarber was named the MVP of the All-Star game for having 3 home runs, going 3 for 3 in this swing off. But, this was quite an interesting twist to the end of an All-Star game. I think it was pretty cool. I would like to see it that, you're able to call on any names. It would have been cool to see like Ohtani, Schwarber, and Alonso versus like Aaron Judge, Cal Raleigh, and Brent Rooker. That would have been a pretty cool battle, if you can call it that. You have the best of the best hitters going against each other. And I think 3 swings, that's like the perfect amount of time to get everybody fresh and in there. But, this is hopefully, this doesn't happen every single year. But I think instead of, having the ghost runner in an all-star game, this is a good resolution for years to come. But overall, from watching the highlights and watching everything back and seeing clips, I think it was a good all-star game. We had a bunch of new names. We had Mizorowski join after 5 starts, which, it didn't really sit right with me. I get that, it is a showcase and we want to see our favorite players come in. But I think there's, more players that were deserving of this. I think Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sanchez had been throwing the ball really well, if not better than Mizorowski. But I can see where the MLB is coming from, and wanting to put fans in the seats to watch this guy 6'5", 6'6" throw absolute bullets and 97-mile-an-hour sliders across the plate. So I can understand it. It wouldn't have been, my first choice of, all-stars to pick. I know Ranger Suarez is pretty boring compared to Mizorowski, but that guy's just more deserving in my opinion. But overall, yeah, I think this was, a great couple days for pitching, for hitting, and I just love to see all the new names that come in every year and have their opportunity to show out. Chapman, I still find it crazy. That guy is just still disgusting at his age, and I don't think he's going to be slowing down anytime soon. But I did see that, closing this all out on the All-Star festivities, I did see that the Phillies are hosting the 2026 All-Star Game, so should be a pretty cool atmosphere there. I always find it pretty cool looking at that stadium from like a bird's eye view and just the dimensions and how that's going to play in say the home run derby. But we'll see. We'll see next year how everything plays out. Maybe we see it probably will be Skenes starting again for the National League, but with this run of dominance from Skubal, who knows what he demands in free agency if he goes to a different team. Only time will tell. But with that being said, I think that's going to close out everything for today's podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed. Sorry for the little hiatus. Was going through some things for baseball and, got banged up a little bit and kind of took some time off. But we're going to get a little more consistent here, especially a trade deadline coming up in the next coming days. We're going to be talking about that with some people. So stay tuned for all the content. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're watching this and if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, don't forget 5 stars, rate and review. Get this podcast out there to all the baseball lovers that you know. Get them chit-chatting. Would love to hear your guys' opinions on how we can make the All-Star Game, better, or what changes you want to see for next year, or if you're perfectly fine with everything. Let me know down below. But with all that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.